Welcome to Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Joyous conversations about what the afterlife evidence and modern science combine to tell us is true about our one reality. You have nothing to fear. You are eternal and you are perfectly loved. Knowing the truth changes everything. Now, here's Roberta.
Welcome to Seek Reality. I'm Roberta Grimes, and I am delighted that you can be with us today. Oh, my dear friends, right on the edge of modern, cutting-edge therapy is something that very few, even very modern therapists yet understand, can use to help us, or know anything about at all. But it's amazing, and it's a truly extraordinary source of information about the lives that you and I are living now. Our wonderful guests this week are experts in these very esoteric fields of between lives regression and the hypnotic kinds of expansion of consciousness that are possible, but that very few people understand. Of course, we have other favorite guests too who have talked with us about some of these wonderful ways that we can come to better understand our own minds. Most notably, our great friend Peter Wright is a past life regression therapist, and he has helped many Seek Reality listeners. And now Andy Tomlinson and his partner Reena Kumarasingham have come to us today, and they're doing wonderful work in this and related fields across the pond. I'm excited to say that they're able really to help to expand our minds in ways that we really don't know much about. So I'm going to be learning right along with you, and I'm so excited about this now. Andy Tomlinson is a psychologist, he's a psychotherapist, and he's the founder of the Past Life Regression Academy in 2002 and the Spiritual Regression Therapy Association. He is the author of Exploring the Eternal Soul and Healing the Eternal Soul. So he's been in this field for a very long time. And Reena Kumarasingham, she told me I said it right once, so I'll never be able to do it again. Reena Kumarasingham has been a regression therapist, a between lives therapist, and a trainer and supervisor for the Past Life Regression Academy since 2014. She's the author of Shrouded Truth, The Magdalene Lineage, and Divine Consciousness, and she spearheads the pioneering the New Consciousness Retreats. Welcome, Andy and Reena. I am very excited to have you here with us today.
Thank you so much for having us.
It's wonderful to be here with you.
Well, let's get into this, because the things that you know and the things that you can teach are things I know about, and I know that they're true and real, but frankly, they're things I know very little about. So I'm excited to hear you tell us more. Now, there were things that we talked about ahead of time that you could tell us about, but what I'm interested in actually, especially, is past lives regression therapy and how it can help us, because I know it's real. I know it happens. I've actually had it done to me, but I don't know very much about this. So what can you teach us?
Well, I first came across working with past lives, having spent 4 years as a psychotherapist, and I was also trained in hypnosis. And I asked my supervisor at one time, if a past life comes up, what do you do? And she just simply said, treat it like a metaphor. And that was it. That was the lack of my training. Because we're going back all the way to, 1996. And then working with past lives, certainly in the West, was very new. There was just one or two pioneers who were working with it. And one of my first clients came up to me, and she was an elderly lady. And she said, I keep having these thoughts about Venice. Maybe I've had a past life there. Can you help? So I thought, oh, my goodness. What do I do? I haven't really been trained in this. So I took her to a very deep level of trance. And as I subsequently found out people only need to be very light levels of trance in order to move into past lives. In fact, I probably took her to too deep a level, because after the past life story had emerged, she couldn't remember anything about it. But anyway, when I work, all I do is ask questions like, what happens next, and tell me more. And the story just unfolds. And it turns out in this case, she was a madam looking after prostitutes in Venice a few hundred years ago. And in those days, people who looked after prostitutes were the lowest of the low and rejected by everybody else. But anyway, this story emerged quite spontaneously, and when it had finished, I'd recorded it, and the lady said, "Oh, well, I don't remember anything about it, but don't tell me. Just let me have the recording, and I'll go through and listen to it." So she sat down with all of her friends to listen to this recording, not knowing quite what was going to happen. And then all of a sudden, this story emerged of her being the keeper of prostitutes. And being a rather elderly, prim lady, she couldn't believe that this is what actually happened, and was a little upset, actually. She was hoping it would be something like a king or a queen or somebody famous. And of course, the situation is most people come out when they go into past lives into just simple people at whatever time of history that they had. But there would be some sort of emotional lesson that they would be going through. And following this, I went through another 2 years of training, working with past lives, and I came across the most amazing ways in which this sort of therapy can heal. And again, the whether it's a real past life or not is really up to the person who's coming in for therapy. I simply say, I'll just facilitate it and then just ask open questions and allow the story to emerge. But some of the things that help people decide that it's real is not only the spontaneous way in which it comes out, a little bit like the lady we were talking about, but also sometimes emotions or physical sensations can come through. But the important thing from a therapeutic point of view is we're only going into past lives to try to help resolve a problem in the current life that someone's having a big problem with. I mean, for example, a lady came to me who was suffering from powerlessness, was in a relationship where she was being abused, and it sounded a bit like a narcissist that she was with who psychologically abused her, ridiculed her. And when people are in these sort of situations, it's very hard for them to do what a lot of other people would do, of standing up and to leave the situation. So going into a past life is very helpful because people can help resolve the current life by getting a different perspective of their current life problem. And for her, she went into a past life of being a young girl in Victorian England who'd been born an orphan and eventually was working extremely long hours in a laundry until a rich gentleman found her, took her out of the laundry and married her. And she thought this was a wonderful thing until she discovered that he had a mean streak and used to beat her. And there was nothing she could do because she didn't have any parents to go to. She didn't have any money because in Victorian England, the men owned all the money. And because he was well known in society, who would believe her? So she just had to take these beatings again and again until eventually one of them was too strong for her and she fell down some stairs and died. And for her soul, she'd been in this very difficult situation because this is often what souls choose to do because they want to try to work through and resolve it. But in this case, it wasn't resolved, that she wasn't able to resolve this very difficult situation that she was in. So the work with the past life is to help people transform it. And this is such an important part of therapy. And for her, it was so she had the opportunity to talk to the consciousness of the person who'd done that and just tell them what she thought of them, and also a bit of psychodrama where she was able to like physically push away and imagine pushing away the person who was beating and abusing her. And reframing like this is an extremely powerful way where people can like role play or experience the power that everybody has within them.
Yeah.
And she had another follow-on session because there was some physical abuse in the current life where she reframed it in a very similar way to the past life, but the past life was the root of it all. And then eventually she was able to stand up to her abusive husband and say, treat me well or leave me. And I know that sounds extremely simple, but when you're a battered person in a relationship, it's probably one of the hardest things to do. And he left and she was overjoyed, and she eventually found another relationship within a loving situation. And it was almost like her soul needed to find a way to resolve the issue. And by having a similar situation, just a little bit of help in the therapeutic setting, and she was able to achieve a massive shift in her consciousness and transform her life.
So that's one way in which a past life can shed perspective on your present life and give you the opportunity to step outside the present life and work on the present life then and solve the problems in the present life and resolve them. So that sounds pretty powerful.
Yeah.
I was just going to add a slightly different dimension to it. I grew up a Hindu, and so, for us, past lives was just part of life. It was just part of the belief system. And what we learned, what the belief system revolved around is that our soul is eternal. Mm-hmm. And whenever we reincarnate, it's like dropping into a stage, into a costume, which is our body. Mm-hmm. And we're playing out these roles or these lessons that we have chosen to come and play out. And then we leave that particular role, and then we move on, and then we drop into a different role, into another stage with different co-stars. And then we move out. And that's basically what that's a metaphor for what the reincarnation cycle is. And so when we actually work with these past lives, it's actually working on the eternal soul, like what the eternal soul wants to learn and how the eternal soul wants to evolve and how then it impacts our current life. If our current life has the same sort of lessons and evolutionary points that we want to grow into, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And this is also where the between life spiritual regression aspect comes in as well. So in terms of between lives spiritual regression, it is something that a psychologist in the US found. His name is Dr. Michael Newton. He called it Life Between Lives Regression.
Yeah, he wrote wonderful books, yes.
He did write wonderful books. And so basically it's all about the principle behind it is that in between lives, we go to the spirit realms and we plan our lives. So we plan what lessons we want to learn. We plan how our soul wants to evolve. We plan who the other characters are going to be in the play. And then we come down and with amnesia, we forget the planning. And then we go through the life, learning the lessons for the soul evolution. And what the between life session do is under very deep hypnosis, someone can actually go back to their between lives just before the current life and actually find out what the plan is, who the players are, what the contract is between the different main characters in your life are, and then you will get a completely different spiritual perspective about it. So, for example, I had a client very much like Andy. She was, it's completely different people, but she was also someone who went through severe abuse, spousal abuse in this particular life. And when it came to a point where the husband had left, or she had left the husband, she then came to me to find out why was it she came down to experience this? Because, it's really traumatic. It's really painful. It's very hurtful, and it's really difficult. And so when we did our between life session, what the information she got was that her soul, over a span of different lives, was learning about different aspects of love. So, whether it's to give love, unconditional love, family love, all these different aspects of love. But in this life, she came down to experience the lack of love. And so, and then to find that love within herself, if that makes sense. Yeah. So by going through that particular horrific period in her life, as a soul, she grew because she learned to love herself. And so when she got that perspective, what she realized as well is the soul that came down to play this husband role, this ex-husband role, was actually an agreement between them, that it was actually a contract between them. She was going to learn about, the lack of love, therefore finding love within herself. And he as well was learning about lack of love because he had, the lack of love. And so he was also learning a different aspect of that. And when she came out of the session, bearing in mind this was after she had left her husband, because she had had this soul perspective, this higher perspective, it actually healed. And she got her answers. It actually healed quite a lot of her hurt and her pain. She never went back to that particular person, but she moved on, sort of carrying this love she found for herself. And it just enhanced her life moving forward. So there's actually, it's actually a linear. If you plotted it on like the soul evolution on a linear table, you got your past lives, your between life, past life, between life, past life, between life, current life, and then moving forward.
So the between life is a place to learn more about love and then apply it in the next life?
The between lives is a place where we go and we sort of gather what we have learned in our current life, in the different lives. So the lives are like the school where we learn and we experience, and the between lives is where we sort of, sort of gather all the information and sort of come to terms with it, as it were, where we sort of match up the plan with the execution. And the execution happens in the life.
So we've learned, that's where we consolidate what we've learned in the lives, and then we can apply that in the next lifetime.
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Wow. Okay. And do we all have...
I think this is a very powerful spiritual message because, a lot of people are in a very difficult situation with life events that are happening, and it's very easy to become a victim, to blame others, to blame the system.
Oh, yes.
Whereas in reality, they've chosen as a soul to be in this challenging situation, to grow and learn. Because if they just simply came down on earth and they were just eating grapes all the time and in a wonderful situation, as wonderful as it may seem from a human perspective, there wouldn't be the same learning. And sometimes souls try to get the maximum learning. In fact, sometimes they take it too far.
Yes. Are overloaded.
Reena talks about the metaphor of they plan to climb Everest in this life rather than just a small hill. Yeah. And they're halfway up Everest and they say to themselves, why on earth is this life so difficult? Right. And of course, it's something they've chosen to do, where as a soul, they may want to work through a life lesson in one incarnation rather than coming back in several incarnations and slowly building up spiritual strength to handle difficult situations in that area.
Can I just give an example for that? Because I had a client, I saw multiple sessions. And the first session she went to, she was a concubine in ancient China. And, it was a rather flat life. She lived in the lap of luxury. Nothing much was happening. All she had to do was wait for the emperor to come, should he come, and other than that, she was like walking around the gardens and she was eating like really nice food and things like that. And when she went to that death point in that particular life, she, as a soul, she actually said, oh my goodness, that was so boring. I want something different now. I really want to, because she learned nothing. There was no growth in her. So she was like, okay, that was holiday. We're done with the holiday. Let's move on. And so the next life she went to, she was a warrior in ancient China. And, and she was chopped up into 1,000 pieces. That was her past life death. And obviously there was a lot of trauma associated with that. And so, after we did what Andy calls the body therapy, where we sort of put the energy of the body together so that it's not fragmented and call in this, like all the different soul parts, then we had a chat about what she learned in this life. And, she had learned about hardship. She learned about the loss of family. She had learned about camaraderie with her soldier friends, her other warrior friends, and loyalty, like all these different aspects that she could then sort of absorb within her soul evolution and her soul growth. So it's a flip of perspectives, because when we're in the body and we're going through something really difficult, while we're in the body, it's horrific, right? We just don't want to do it. We query why we're doing it. But once we leave the body, and from a soul perspective, that horrific time actually leads to a lot of growth and a lot of evolution and therefore ascension for the soul, which is what the soul is craving for.
Yeah, but we do know as a fact that it seems from there, when we're planning our lives, everything looks like it's going to be so easy. Of course, we can do this and, add that and, add another thing, bad stuff. All that bad stuff we're going to learn from. And people do, as you say, overplan unbelievably the lives that they're going to enter, which is, can be very hard once we're here.
Yes, it can be extremely difficult. And this is where I think we also find that people actually choose to exit early, if that makes any sense, because it is so difficult, and even then there are, what we've experienced with the spirit realms, that the guides are very compassionate. No one scolds you for exiting early, because everything in the realm of consciousness and soul is about free will.
Yes.
And so the guides just sit there and go, well, maybe we shouldn't have planned it this way. Let's try it a different next time,
Right. Let's next time, let's be a little more realistic about what we do.
Yeah.
I've got a case study that illustrates that, if I can share it.
Yes.
This is a lady from Canada who approached me for between life regression. And when she came, she told me that her husband had died 6 months before. And she was finding it very difficult coping with her life. So we went into, to do a life between life. First of all, people go into a past life. Then they go through the past life death and then into the soul memories between lives. And she went into a past life of being a lady whose husband had gone off to war and never returned. And she found it difficult coping and had just given up on life, which is a bit like a form of suicide. There were opportunities where she could have got into new relationships, but she chose not to. And after the death point, she was met by the spirit guide. And the spirit guide oversee a person's past life, and they give it advice and help. And an important part of the between life is the review of the past life. Mm-hmm. And the spirit guide said to her, "This is the third time now, isn't it?" No, and what he meant is there had been 2 other lives where a similar sort of thing had happened, where she'd given up on life or committed suicide because the loss of a loved one was too much. And the loss of a loved one is an enormously difficult thing to work through. It's not easy. And it takes many, many years. And even after many years, there'll still be like a lower level of loss associated. But when people can't work through it and they give up on life, then that's a different thing altogether. And she was met by the spirit of the person who was a husband from that past life, who had also been with her on the other lives as well. And the 2 of them started to go through a plan with a spirit guide about what they would do for their next life, because she was determined as a soul to work through this issue. It's like someone who's failed an exam at school and so, right, I'm going to go through and reset it, and I'm determined to get through next time. And they looked at various scenarios. Should she be a man losing a wife, or should she be older or younger? And in the end, they agreed that what they would do would be to have her as a woman again. He would be the husband, and this we're talking about the current life. He would be the husband in the current life, but would die. And for him, he wanted to learn about patience. So she had a contract with him to stop him rushing into new business ventures so that he could learn patience, but he would die at a younger age. And then what she would learn would be the ability to be able to cope with things after the death. But what they would do, she would be much more independent. She would be able to have her own job, be financially dependent. So it was a lot easier to manage that loss situation. So that was their plan. And one of the things that always happen with these between life sessions is that it's reviewed by a group of spiritual beings that are evolved to the point where they don't need to reincarnate. Often have words like elders or wise ones or so on. And they reviewed it and they made a couple of adjustments to the plan. They suggested that she arranged to have a spiritual regression to find out more about what the events were to help her through the loss, and also made an adjustment with the amount of soul energy to bring down. And this is, when people bring more soul energy, it's easier to cope with life difficulties. Less soul energy, it's a lot harder. So it's a very subjective level that they work out intuitively. And then she went through she came out of the regression and we talked about it, and it transformed her. The knowledge of what had happened, that it was her idea of what had happened to her, it kind of empowered her to look at life in a completely different way and to realize all the skills that she had that she could utilize in a positive way. And she started her own company and got into a new relationship.
Oh, good.
And from being potentially a victim, which she could have been, she turned it to an advantage where she realized all the strengths that she had, she was able to utilize the strength of being strong enough to manage even difficult situations like the loss of a loved one. And so it does illustrate some of the points about these life between life sessions and how powerful they can be.
That's wonderful. The fact that people have unguessable strengths that they never access, but that these sessions can allow them to access, that will empower them. To me, that is really wonderful. I mean, don't you love seeing that? Love seeing people grow from that knowledge?
Yeah,
I
definitely.
mean, wow.
And how their life completely shifts because the perspective shifts.
Yes. I mean, for many people sort of are half alive. They don't even guess at who they are, inside. It's like they're a half hatched egg. They never really open. They never really a flower that never opened. And so I know people like that, and I try to get them to launch themselves, to try, to grow. And a lot of people don't even understand how much is there in themselves. So it's beautiful what these sessions can do for people. Don't you think it's wonderful?
I think it's wonderful. And I also think that when people come down into bodies, they think that's it. Like life is stop, start, stop. And then they go to heaven or they go, they die. But actually it's not. If you look at the physical body, yeah, there's a start, stop. But if you look at the evolution of the soul, it's actually a continuum. And once people access that consciousness, that soul part of themselves,
Yes.
that's when there is all this knowledge and all these insights, and that's where they draw strength, because then they realize, oh, I've already had this particular experience and this is what I've learned from it. And really it's about, in the current world, we sort of look more at the external for validation. We look more at the external to develop belief systems. We look more at the external to condition ourselves. But it's actually going inside where the untapped reservoir is. And what these sessions do is that they allow people to go inside and actually tap into these reservoirs and draw from within as opposed to from without.
Yeah, no, I think it's wonderful. So a typical session then that you might do with a client would enable them to access these deeper areas and grow from what they learn then in these deeper areas?
Yeah, because all the sessions, be it past life sessions or between life sessions, come from, they happen under hypnosis. And when we say hypnosis, we don't mean stage hypnosis. That's a different form of hypnosis. What we do is we quiet the conscious mind, which is really the mind that accesses the outside world, and we tap into the subconscious mind. And if you look at an iceberg, the conscious mind is the top part of the iceberg, and the subconscious mind is all that's at the bottom.
Which is most of the mind, yes.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that's where, once we tap into the subconscious mind, we can then go deep, using the metaphor of the iceberg, and really tap into all that reservoir.
Yeah. And so people learn a lot, even in one session, I would imagine, working with you.
Mm-hmm. They do learn.
But the important thing is that people have an experience and make up their own mind about it. Because a lot of people may have fixed beliefs about one thing or another, and that's fine. But they may be just based on things they've read or they've heard rather than something they've actually experienced. And one of the really powerful ways of doing it is for people simply to try it for themselves. I'll give you an example of this. I had a gentleman came to me who wanted to write a book about past lives. And he said, well, I've tried having a past life before, but I don't think it was real. And I don't really want to go writing a book about past lives unless I'm absolutely sure that they're real. Can you help? So I thought, oh, well, okay, this isn't quite, I could have perhaps gone to a point where he got some sort of therapeutic benefit, but I thought, well, okay, just make the intent to go to a past life that would be helpful for him to realize past lives are real. And he went into a past life where he was being tortured and he was held down on a wooden bench. His arms and hands had been strapped down and they were starting to pull out his fingernails. And normally I would go through those sort of events quite quickly because there isn't really need to have a lot of detail about that. But in this case, because he wanted to know it was real, I did dwell a bit longer on the pulling out the fingernails, and he could feel each fingernail coming out. And then when he came back, I said, well, do you think that past life was real? And he said, well, must have lost a marble, he said, if I'd have come out with something like that, and the physical sensations, he said, how could I have made that up? And he was totally convinced past lives were real. And I mean, that's not something that would be done therapeutically, but it was just done to illustrate how incredibly powerful the experiences can be and how it affects people's mindsets.
I mean, we've had gentlemen clients who've come through, who've gone into past lives as pregnant women giving birth. And and they go through the pain. And they come and they come out of the experience going, I'm really going to be there for my wife moving forward.
Yeah. It's a big bowl of flowers, that's for sure.
But I just add another dimension to this, is about what do the medical profession think about this. And of course, the medical profession are trained to look for physical cures for physical problems, so that's physical medication of some sort or physical surgery. But there was one particular doctor called Peter Mack in Singapore, who is the head of surgery in Singapore Hospital. And he was really keen to help all of his clients. And sometimes people were coming through with medical problems where he couldn't resolve it using traditional medicine. And for example, one of his clients had extreme anxiety, depression, were dropping unconscious with panic attacks, very severe. In fact, she was a nurse from the hospital, and he really wanted to help us. So he came on the training that I do and was trained as a regression therapist working with past lives. And then he went in and worked with her and resolved the issues. And she was able to come back to work. And he was so amazed with how powerful it was. He wrote a book about it called Healing Deep Hurt Within, Dr. Peter Mack. And then he started to work with some of these other clients. And then eventually word started to get around the hospital about what he was doing. And he was asked to do a talk to the medical doctor. So he was in this room with about 20 or 30 medical doctors, all with their arms crossed, looking very skeptical about what he was doing. And it was very smart, was Peter, because he prepared for this, and he had a video of each of the clients he worked with of what the problem was before and what the symptoms were like afterwards. And because he hadn't charged them for anything, this was their way of doing it like an energy exchange. And then he would explain in the middle of it what he actually did. And because these people were coming to say, these were the issues I had, and after the session, this is how I feel. It's like when there was enough of those coming through, he finished his talk and the medical doctor would come into him and say, Peter, this amazing new therapy you've discovered. He said, tell us, what's it called? He said, well, it's called hypnotic regression therapy. He didn't like to use the word past lives too much. So, and hypnosis is widely accepted in the medical world. So he just changed the title slightly, but it just does illustrate with the right information and with open minds, just how we can transform even some of the darker areas of the healing profession.
Yeah, I think it's just beginning, just starting to dawn, this more open-minded attitude. I mean, it's been more than a century since medicine in science in general, decided that everything has to be materialist or we don't want to know about it. And so we're just edging a little beyond that. It's an exciting time to be alive.
Exactly.
Watching this happen.
And so what we did was, because, we're just going to touch quickly on near-death experiences. There have been quite a few medical doctors who've done quite a lot of research on near-death experiences where they are challenging the materialist paradigm that, everything ends with the body and that consciousness, is part of the brain and it ends with the body. But these experts who looked at near-death experiences, they basically said, no, actually, consciousness exists outside the body. And what we did as part of a research between Andy and I is we realized that the stages of near-death experiences that were, given through accounts of those who've experienced it are very similar to the initial stages of the between life sessions.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's, the where you go to the part where your heart stops beating, there is introduction of, a higher being or a spirit guide. There is the pull towards the light. There is probably a healing. There's probably a chat about the, the current life or the, the life that they're leaving. And so what Andy and I did was we thought we looked at, we wondered if this was universal or if this was just, for a small sample. So what we did was we looked at about 400 or 500 different accounts of between live sessions, and we looked that were conducted across 25 years from different parts of the world, and we looked at all these accounts of near-death experiences, about 300 of them, and we correlated the different stages, and we found that actually there is a correlation, that there is a similarity between these different stages. And so if you get two different disciplines coming together and there is a similarity, then it actually puts forward a really strong proposition that consciousness does exist beyond the physical body. And, and this is something that would also, really challenge the materialist paradigm moving forward.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yeah, I've done extensive studies of consciousness. I'm quite confident that Max Planck was right, and it is the base underlying force. In fact, someone has just put forth a theory of physics which says that consciousness underlies everything, which is just what Max Planck said. So we're getting closer and closer to the truth. Quite wonderful.
Yeah.
We're coming toward the end of our time. What do you want people to take from our conversation together?
I think for me, what I'd like people to take away is that reservoir of strength within, that reservoir of being within, that we are not what others tell us that we are. We are not what the outside world tells us what we are. We are our soul beings. And that if we can tap into that a lot more, which is really difficult in the modern world, but, if we can actually make the time and effort to tap into that a lot more, then I think we will find that there will be an enormous shift within our lives. And we need to break belief systems and conditioning, which is no easy task. But once we actually make the effort to do that, then I think we can see ourselves as the eternal, strong, loving soul beings, as opposed to just the human form that we are.
Extraordinary. Beautifully said.
Thank you.
And one thing I would like to add is that at the moment we're in a very unique position as souls because the earth is going through a big shift of consciousness. The vibrations are raising enormously. And the effect of these vibrations, because everything is energy, what we call a human body is just simply energy. It's of a dense nature. And these high vibrations that are coming in are amplifying everything. And it's amplifying, particularly at an emotional level, it's amplifying the emotions of love and joy and happiness. But it's also amplifying unresolved emotions, fear or shame or sadness or depression. So things that may have not been a big issue in the past where people have just put to one side, all of a sudden are seeming far more significant. Relationships are causing strains. And just to build on what Reena said, is that as souls we've chosen to be down here, and there's resources to help. There's lots of amazing books that have got tips to help. There's lots of information on the internet, and we've published things in a book we've recently put out called Between Lives. Or there's therapists that can help. And all I would say to everybody is everything is an opportunity to grow. So, these voices from the past that are coming through that may be causing some sort of distress are actually a voice to open up a pathway to finding out who we really are as eternal beings. The very thing that Reena was talking about.
And an opportunity to grow.
Yes.
It's all about growth, all about spiritual growth. Beautifully said. And if you want to know how to get in touch with them, it's pioneeringnewconsciousness.com. It'll be in the notes to this program. So once again, my beloved friends, we've come to the end of our time together, and this has been Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. I'm so happy you could be with us today for this beautiful conversation. Please never forget, you are a powerful, eternal being. You never began, and you never will end. And when you get that, when you really understand all the implications of that fact, it changes everything in your life for the better. Next week, our guests also from across the pond will be Carrie McLeod and Bill Dykes. They're wonderful, beautiful British mediums who collaborate weekly with our dear and amazing friend Sandra Champlain on her terrific Sunday gathering. And they're going to be here with us for the second time. Carrie and Phil have a new book coming, and in any event, you're going to love them. They're perfectly delightful guests and friends, so please be sure to join us next week. And this week, our guests have been Andy Tomlinson and Reena Kumarasingham, who also have been with us from across the pond just for the first time, but not for the last. I'd love to have them back again. They're experts in the astonishing fields of past life regression therapy and helping people to ever better understand the effects that our past lives, our between lives, and all these surprising, amazing things going on in our inner lives do indeed have on the lives that we're living now. When you access everything that you are and can be, it can so much deepen and enrich the lives that you're living right now. So get to know who you truly are, because who you truly are is amazing and beautiful beyond all comprehension. And that's about all we have time for today. I get so fascinated, I just can't stop listening. So this has been Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Please enjoy, please make the most of this coming week in our one reality, always knowing that you in particular are a powerful, eternal being. And you, most of all in this entire universe, listen carefully to this. You in particular are infinitely, eternally, perfectly and forever loved.
You've been listening to Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Roberta blogs and answers questions at robertagrimes.com. Join us every week as we explore what the afterlife evidence and modern science combine to tell us is true about the one reality we all share. Knowing the truth changes everything.